Hey friends, it's Jess with Virtually Visual, and today we're going to be recreating Bombas Slippers, specifically their Sunday slipper. Also, I was inspired to create this slipper because I kept getting this ad, kept just catching my eye, and it was this. This was the image that I saw on YouTube. Super simple, but very colorful and fun, and y'all know I love brightly colored things. I also love fur and fuzz. You guys know this was probably bound to happen. I'm gonna go through how you can recreate these Bombas slippers, and let's dive right in. Okay, so for the first part of this tutorial, we're actually going to create two planes, and these are going to be for the actual images we'll use as a reference to build our shape. I'm actually also going to pull in a figure because I want to have somewhat of an accurate scale, and we'll call this first plane front. Let's scale this down, and we will also set the axis to Z. So I'm going to scale this way down, probably like that. Then let's make a copy, so control and drag, and we'll call this side. And we're just gonna hit R on our keyboard and rotate 90 degrees, something like this. Okay, I'm also gonna remove my work plane because I think it'll be a little distracting. So these are going to be placements for our images for modeling. Let's create a material. We'll call this reference. And we can drag that onto our front and our side. And let's go into the reference, and you may have noticed that folder I showed you, I saved out a bunch of photos of the different slippers as a reference. So the one that we'll be utilizing is this front side image that I grabbed, and this is actually just one of the product images from the website. So go to the Bombas slipper or whatever shoe you're going to be recreating, and you can always download like the product shots, and then especially if they have something like this image, that's ideal because it's kind of like the exact thing we need to begin modeling. So that's the image I have, and I'm going to drag this into our node editor, and I'm just going to connect this to the color. And one other thing we might want to do, if I can remember where exactly we set this. Okay, yeah, so one other thing to point out is that if you're working in your viewport and you're like, my images look really fuzzy even though the file that I downloaded is not actually that fuzzy. One thing you can do is you can go into, click on your material that's assigned to your objects, and then if you double click into them, there is a viewport tab, and by default the texture preview size will give you this fuzziness, but you can set this to like 1024 and it will be much clearer. Before we actually start, I think we need to move the images a bit because as you can see, we're just seeing both on both planes, and what I'd like to do ideally is have the shoe kind of resting in the middle and look correct when I turn this as well. So I'm going to go to our material on the front, and I'm going to play with the offset here of the U value. I want this to be like kind of directly in the middle, and then I need to move the side one as well, and we might need to flip the side one like that. And now we can play with the offset of the side option here. So you feel free to go into the negative. Basically you want to be like able to turn this. Do you see that there where like as I turn the slipper, it's almost like it's really in 3D in the middle. These edge copies will get a little distracting, but I didn't let that bother me in the moment. But if it does bother you, feel free to go in and edit the image in something like Photopea or Photoshop and get rid of that if you'd like. Okay, so now we have our images set up and we can begin modeling. First, I'm just going to actually turn off our side view for now and focus on the front view. And I'm actually going to go into the front because I want to make sure I'm not rotating this incorrectly. And if it looks like this, you can change that by going to display and changing this to garage shading. And then the first step here is actually just bringing in a cube. Pretty straightforward. And we're going to scale this down. I'm just going to focus on getting this the correct width and about the correct height of the slipper. So I think something like that. I'm going to create a copy of this cube just in case. And actually I won't hide that. I'm going to create a null and call this hidden. And I'm going to hide this null, and I'll drag this to bottom and drag that cube in there just in case I need that later. And we can delete our figure. Okay, so this is the cube we're going to work with. I'm going to hit C so that it makes it editable. And then I'm going to go into the face view, and I'm going to go to the knife tool and hold down and get the loop path cut tool here. So if I start dragging over these lines, you can see that we can now make some loop cuts. And if I hold shift, it'll snap it directly to different points. Something that could help us here is actually going to the cube and setting this to X-ray so that we can see the image below it. Okay, so again, we just made that loop cut. Let's make a couple more to start, and then we'll go in and add further. Basically, I want to look for points that are the widest and the thinnest on the shoe. So I'm just going to make some cuts where I see the lowest and highest, or the thinnest and widest points on the slipper. Okay, so we've made some cuts to start. So now what we need to do is we are going to go into the point selection mode. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, I have 5 cuts that I've made, some loop selections, and now I'm going to resize these to fit the overhead width of my slipper. I'm going to switch my selection to rectangle selection, and I'm going to select these 2 points, and I'm going to hit T in my keyboard to scale, and I'm actually going to use this red one. I'm not going to use just the cursor and start dragging all of them. I'm just going to do the red x-axis selection. And then I could also move this so it's kind of right at the end point where the heel would be. Okay, and then we can just continue with the rest of the points. I'm just going to hit T, resize on the x-axis so it kind of matches what I'm seeing in the background on our plane. Okay, so this is what I have with resizing those loop cuts, and you can see that there are spots where we need some more loop cuts, so I'm going to add a couple of more. We may need to add some more later, but for now I think this is a good starting point for our overhead view. And now it's going to be time to switch to our side view and start working with the points from that aspect. So I'm going to now go into the right view. I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to turn on our side picture and turn off the front now. And we can go back to garage shading. And now we are going to do the same thing of just resizing points to fit the picture. This is another instance where you're probably going to need to add a few more points because, as you can see, stuff is in a different spot here than the other side. So yeah, you just might need to add some more points and scale as needed. Okay, so this is now where we can go back to our original perspective view and just take a look at what we're working with. So I'm going to turn off the side view as well, and we can now kind of move around and look at our slipper. So as you can see, this was our front view and this is our side view. And the reason why it looks a little bit funky is because there is no hole here for where the leg will actually go into the slipper. So that is the next step that we need to do. But something that I think is fun to kind of visualize is throwing this cube into a subdivision surface. And you can see that the shape is much more smooth and definitely closer to kind of the slipper actual shape that we're going for. So I'm going to go into our cube again, and I'm going to turn off X-ray view for a moment. And we are going to go and we are going to create that inner section to be the hole. Before I actually move on to the middle portion, I am also going to create, I think, a front down cut on the shoe. Let's just see if that helps. We're going to go to our knife tool, and we are going to add some cuts starting from this line here. So I'm going to do something like maybe like this. We might have to go back and change this if this is not what we're looking for, but trial and error, folks. Okay, and then something like that. And then we are going to go into face view, and we are going to select these inner polygons, and we are going to inset those a little bit just by clicking on inset and dragging in. And then we're going to go to the right. Let's make our cube X-ray mode, and we're going to drag those selected polygons down into the shoe. And let's rotate this about 15 degrees and continue dragging. And I want to leave a little bit of thickness there at the bottom, something like that. And let's just take a peek at what we are now working with. So This is kind of the new shape of our shoe that we have. I think it's pretty good there, and we might need to just sharpen some things up by adding some more loop cuts. So let's see, if we click on our shoe, we should be able to, or if we click on the cube, you should be able to see now the wireframe of our original shape. So I might bring the inner polygons up a little bit there. Maybe I want to click into line loop selection mode, and I might go and make this portion, the top portion, a little bit bigger, an additional loop cut, so that stands out a little bit more. And maybe we want to bring that down to kind of sharpen. Totally up to you. So then the next step is, let's go back to our face selection. I went to loop selection and I selected those inner polygons, and I think I went to the side and I dragged this towards the middle, and then I scaled this up, I believe, but to kind of get a basic shape going. And then we're going to need to go inside of the shoe and adjust all of these. So really the one I need to adjust now is the toe section. So I'm going to click on those two polygons. We're going to go to the side view. Let's scale these down and drag this further down. Okay. Something like that. And then again, we can look from the side view and adjust things. And I'm going to go in here and move some of these points. You can just start expanding points as needed. So I'm liking that. I think this is a good spot for the base of our shoe. And then let's just bring in our front view as another reference of what we are working with. So I'm just going to drag this out, kind of look at the shoe. It's kind of hard to see, but I want to just get a general feel for that shape, and maybe you want to do some final tweaks to the model. So I think the only other thing I might do is update these 2 points, because I think the inside of our shoe should be much more narrow. And again, you can always go in with this knife tool and add some points if you feel that's needed. So maybe I'll add some more there. Let's just see, does that mess anything up too badly? So let's say we're happy with the shape there. I think this is a good spot to be. So now I might go to our subdivision surface, hit current state to object. That gives us a new geometry object. I'm going to call this shoe base, and I'm going to drag my subdivision surface into hidden. Hide our images. Okay, so we have our shoe base. Let's hit NB on our keyboard with this just solo out here. The only other thing I'm going to do first before we move on to modeling the tag is I am going to throw this into a remesh, because I want this to be a little bit cleaned up as far as the topology. So right away, if we just throw it in a remesh, it looks much better like this. So I think that's pretty nice. Cool, something like that I think is just fine. Okay, so we have our remeshed shoe base, and let's see, did we pull that in there? Okay, I'm gonna right click and do connect objects and delete, and we'll call this right slipper, because this would be the right foot. Okay, so now we can actually model the tag. And if I pull in the front view, again, you can see that the tag itself actually kind of doesn't start right at the edge of where the shoe kind of dips into where the foot would be. It actually starts slightly out, and that is because I think it is sewn into the actual foam or fabric material of the slipper and not just like added on top of the fuzz. So the tag will actually start a little bit out here. And the way I made the tag was actually just by using a plane. And we can set this to Z-axis and scale this way down. Maybe like this. And let's drag this out in front of our shoe. And let's make it about the width that we're looking for and the height as well. Come to about this point on the shoe, and I might rotate this a little bit. And what we can do now is we can actually take the width segments down to maybe just 2. So if you click off of it, it's right there. But I'm going to increase the height segments to maybe 30. And now the way we're going to bend this tag is we are going to pull in the bend modifier. So we can just go to here, modifiers, and click bend and put that on our plane. We can hit fit to parent, and we are going to actually scale the height of this bend down. And I'm going to drag this towards the top portion of our tag here. Okay, so I want this plane to bend, and by default, if I start playing with this value, you can see we have it bending the wrong way. So you can just play with the angle here, set it to 90 degrees, and it should now be bending the correct way. And I did this just so that it would look like the tag is bent into the shoe and sewn in. And then let's get our plane moved into place first, so it looks like it's attached inside that shoe. Maybe something like that is good. I'm okay with it sticking out of the shoe a little bit because we're going to be adding some thickness anyway. And then I'm going to add a couple of more bend modifiers to add to our shape. So I'm going to pull one underneath the first bend, call this bend 2, hit fit to parent so it snaps to that size. We're going to lower that size a little bit this time, and we'll probably need to rotate 90 degrees again for the angle, and then we can just play with this bend again. And it may look funny, but actually this is kind of the angle that we want because we want it to kind of slope down with the angle of the shoe. So I might do about that much, and this is kind of up to your preference. Also, it's important to hit keep length. I didn't do that for the first one either, but make sure you have that enabled. So let's see here. And maybe we want to rotate our tag a little. And kind of be checking how far out that bend goes. And then the other thing to note, if we turn back on our front view, and let me actually open one of the other images, maybe this one. You can see that the tags are also sewn at the bottom to the shoe. So there will be a little bit of a curve the opposite direction where then it is sewn to the bottom. So we're going to add one final bend, and this we'll call bend 3. And for this one, we can drag it further down, and we can rotate this actually 180 degrees on the Z axis, and we can rotate the other direction. But I don't need this quite as tall. And we may need to add one more final bend. Let's also hide these from the viewport just so we can kind of see a little bit better what we're working with. So I'm going to do something like that maybe, and then I'll add one final bend so it's not intersecting with the shoe. So this is kind of the general shape that we've created just with the bend modifiers on that plane object. And then the last thing I'm going to do to this tag for the moment is I'm going to grab a cloth surface, and I'm going to throw that plane into there. We're going to set this to 0.1 for thickness, something about that. And that may seem kind of thick. It's a very thick tag. So I think having a high thickness like this is just fine. And we probably don't need the extra subdivision in there unless you would like. Feel free to add that for that extra curve. The only other part that we need on here is the Bombas logo. And so I did find a vector version of this online. And then I think I have the logo here. Yes. Okay, so we have the Bombas logo. This is the SVG when I imported it. And we don't need to actually extrude this or thicken it. You can actually see there's an extrude depth option right when you import SVGs. So that's pretty nice. So I think I just did, let's see, maybe 0.2, something like that, or even 0.1. You don't want this crazy thick. Okay, so maybe something like that, and then we can just hit C on our keyboard to make this editable, and it will create a null. And we can actually drag that into our hidden just to have it in case we need it. Okay, and then let's right click and connect objects and delete. Let's rename this to Bombas logo. Let's hit Shift C to search, and I'm going to go to Polygon, And once we type polygon, you're going to look for polygon islands to objects, and this will separate each of the letters and the icon into its own layer. So I'm going to hit that, and then it turns this into a null, and you can see now we have all these individual layers here. So the first one is the letter B, so I'm going to rename these accordingly. And then I think these are all parts we don't need, so we can delete those. So now we should have our Bombas lettering. This we can just combine because we know that that's the full logo we want. So I'm going to connect that, and now we've got our Bombas logo. And then I'm just going to go to Tools, Axis, and center the axis on that. And then finally, the way we are going to put this onto the tag is actually by doing a spline wrap. So we need to draw a spline just down the center of the tag so that it has something to project onto. So I'm going to go to here, add an empty spline. We'll call this tag guide, or you could call this logo guide. And we're going to go to the sketch tool, and I'm also going to turn on snapping and set this to polygons instead of points. And now I can draw a line however I want. So let me undo that actually, because that was not super straight. So maybe something like that. And that will be our guide for the tag. So I think that's fine. And then what we can do is we can turn off snapping. And then we're going to click on our logo, and we're going to add a spline wrap. So put that under the logo and drag that spline into there. We also need to rotate our logo. So if you just change this to -90 degrees, that should be fine. And let's see. So we may also need to shrink the logo down a little bit. We're getting a weird clipping at the beginning, but if we offset that a little bit, the Bombas logo should now be on the surface of that spline. But our guide is a little bit too into the tag, so let me turn off our logo a moment. I'm going to click this point. I'm just going to drag it out a little bit. I think we can also get rid of some of these points. Okay, so now we have the logo projected on there. We can just disable the spline wrap in the viewport, and we could even create a copy of the logo by going current state to object and dragging the guide and the old wrapped logo into hidden. So now we have all the elements we need, and let's actually make the axis centered on this tag for now. Okay, so we've got the logo, we've got the tag, we have the slipper itself for the right shoe, and now we just need to make a copy for the left. But before I do that, I'm going to kind of create a little bit of more organization. So I'm going to call this right shoe. I'm going to put the logo as a child of the tag, just so it's always connected to that. And I'll set the tag as a child of the slipper, and we can drag those into this null. And let's save. And you have correctly made a Bombas slipper. So congratulations on that, everybody. Yay. Okay, so now we can directly make a copy. Before we turn on Symmetry, the thing I'm going to do is we're going to go to our null. We're going to go to our Bombas logo, go to face view, and hit Control-A to select all, and create select, store selection. Do this for the tag as well. Control-All, select, store selection. Go to the slipper, Control-All, select, and store selection. So we'll call this shoe, call this tag, and we'll call this logo. Okay, so now if we click and we connect these three, they should be correct. So if we select the logo, we've got the logo. Let's drag this down here as well. We select the shoe. We should have the shoe, and we can select the tag and we'll have the tag. So that is correct. I'm going to just drag these to the correct spots. Okay, so we've got one item that has all of our selection tags that we need. So now we can put that slipper into Symmetry, and we can right click on Symmetry and go current state to object, and it will create two shoes for us. So the nice thing about this, if we hide our Symmetry now, is this is now our left slipper. And again, I mentioned that the Bombas logo is now reversed, which we don't want, but because we have that selection tag, we can just remove that. So if we go to the third selection tag, which is the logo, we can just delete this. Make sure you're in your face view and then hit delete. So it removes it completely. And then what we can go to is we can go to that same logo selection on the right shoe, and we can hold Control, drag a copy of the slipper with that selected. We can go to select, invert, and then delete. And now we just have a Bombas logo on this side. So if I were to drag this, you can see it's just the logo. So I'm going to just call this left logo. And I'm going to drag this into position on our additional slipper. And this doesn't need to be exact because, again, in real life, things are not directly perfect. So I think that looks good. So they both say Bombas now. And I now want to select, I'm actually going to delete all of these selections on the left logo. Let's do the same thing we did before. Control All, select, store selection. I'm going to call this left Bombas logo. And now we can combine this with our left slipper. So if we control or right click and we connect those objects, we should now have another polygon selection tag just for that logo. So we can drag this to after the first three. We can delete that first one for logo because it doesn't have that original one. And now we can just rename this to logo. So now the right slipper has a logo tag. The left slipper has a logo tag. So now we are set up, these selection tags will come in useful later for the materials. And I think we can actually get rid of these additional tags. We might not need any of these edges. So we just have these selection tags we need. So I'm going to move Symmetry into hidden. I don't need to see that anymore. And now we have successfully created our shoes. So I hope you are all very excited. We have 2 Bombas slippers. Okay, so now the fun part comes into play with how we can add some materials and some fuzz, because I think that's the fun part and that's just really exciting. I love fuzzy things. Who doesn't? So the first thing is just we're going to create our base material. So we'll just call this slipper, and we can just drag this onto our left and right slippers. We'll make these the same colors for now. And let's take a look at our image from before. So I just followed the colors that I was seeing here, but I mean, you can obviously do any color. I think these are all just super fun. For this example, maybe I'll do this purple color since I did not render that one out. So let's create a purple color that kind of matches that. So I'm just going to pull in an absolute color. And that just gives us a straight up color node here. So I'm going to create a purple and then we'll tweak that as needed. So this is kind of more of a pinkish purple. So let's pull that more towards this red area, maybe like that. And then it might be a little bit brighter. Let's see, how are we looking? Okay, maybe a little bit more blue. So this will be a good starting point, and then if we need a tweak, we can do so later. So we'll set that, and we'll make this material rough. Not totally, but we'll set it to like 0.8 maybe. And then what we can do is create a new material, and this will be our tag. And we can drag that onto both slippers, and we can select the selection to tag. And now it'll just cover the tag that we created because we set up these selection tags beforehand. So that saves us a lot of time. We don't have to manually select those polygons. And for the tag, I also want this to be fairly rough, but not as rough, or even, I mean, this is totally up to you, because I think if it's a satiny material, then it would be more shiny. But you could also play with the metallic level. Okay, so I'm then going to pull in the tiles node and a bump map, and we're going to be using this to create our fabric weave. So I'm going to set these colors to black and white to kind of act as a height map, and I'm going to solo this and also pull in our render view, and we'll pull that to the left. I'm going to just zoom in here so we can really see what we're working with. So okay, let's focus on the tiles node. Instead of squares, I'm going to choose this pattern and I'm going to go down to weave. And I think I'm going to extend the Y or the V scale because I want this to be kind of more ribbed, and I may squeeze the UV scale or the U scale a little bit to like 0.5. So maybe we'll set this to 3. And then global scale, I'm going to take down to maybe 0.2. This is all just kind of trial and error, honestly. You're going to see now the texture that we are getting with our tiles node. So this could also be where you combine different nodes. So we could grab a color layer, plug this in here, grab a new tiles node, solo that, and we'll set this to be maybe more of lines. So we could do that way. Well, let's rotate this 90 degrees. And then maybe we set this to about that. And we can set this to the color on layer 2. So if we solo this now and we set this to maybe add, or we could do multiply, or even lighten. You can get a ton of different results here, so it's just worth playing around. That is what we have there. So now we have our tag material, and we could set this to be whatever color we want. If we're doing our purple example, they kept it pretty much the same color. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to right click on the purple absolute color we chose from our slipper material, and I'm going to paste that into the color value for our base property. And I might even darken that a little bit. It looks slightly darker than the slipper color. We zoom out here. Let's add a dome light now, because I think we could at this level. Okay, so I'm going to try, I always use this 2 light setup. I think it's just the best. And let's rotate this maybe about there, and let's add a backdrop. Let's add the last material for the Bombas logo, and we can drag this onto our slippers and change the selection to logo. And now we can see what color did they have. So they had like that purpley blue. So I'm going to just change our color here to be that kind of blue tone. We can save. Now it's time to finally add some hair. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to simulate hair objects, add hair, and I'm going to drag our slipper selections in there. So let's call this left hair, and we'll just do 1 for now. So let's go to our left hair, and we're gonna, in the guide section, drag the slipper selection, which is our shoe, and let's change the length to maybe like 5, or even less, maybe 3. And I think that's good. And we can set our segments maybe to 50, and or even 35 maybe. And we'll set our hairs to 70, because we know these are going to be curled, so I really want to be mindful of that. Let's double click now into our hair material, and I'm also going to crop our render view selection just so we can see a certain area as we're working. And let's go, so we clicked into that hair material, let's go to the thickness, set this to 0.02, set the tip to 0.01, and that will change the thickness of our hairs right away. Okay, then I'm going to change the color. I want this to kind of match that purpley tone that we had. So just going to do so here. So let's see how that looks. And I might actually go to the left hair, and instead of polygon vertex, I might choose polygon area, and that should spread things out a little bit. Same for the hairs. Let's go to roots, go to polygon. We can go back to our hair material, and we can start playing with some of the curling and whatnot. So for this case, I actually might change the viewport to hairlines, and I'm going to pause our IPR so I can just work with this in our viewport, because that will just give a faster response as we're working. So right now, these are what our hairs look like. I'm going to zoom in a bit. So let's go back to our hair material, and let's enable a few different things. We're going to enable clump, curl. Actually, let's do clump, curl, and frizz to start, and we can add some other things as we go. Frizz. I'm actually going to turn this and clump off for now. Let's change this to 0. I just want to work with curl to start. So curl to start, it already does a lot of what we're looking for. Okay, so in the curl settings, you can see we've actually already got some really nice curl, but I do think I want to up this a little bit more. So I think just playing around with that value, curling it as much as you'd like. If you notice that the curls in the Bombas slippers are really tight curls and they do clump together and they kind of almost pearl on the shoe. So we really want those curls here to also be quite tight. And we can add some variation. So if we set this to 50, we're going to get much more variation. I probably only want this set to like 20. And then what we can do is we can actually change the amount. So if I start bringing this down to 0, none of them will be affected. All the way up, all affected. But we can bring this down to maybe 90 so that we do have some stray hairs here and there. And then those we can affect maybe with the wave option. So that's an option there. I've set the wave previously to control the frequency of waves with this. So increasing this will obviously add more waves on the x-axis and the y-axis. So that's kind of up to you as far as what you want to do there. We can add some variation to this as well. But one thing that I also feel like has really helped bring those curls together is by selecting this tighten option. So tighten will just pull things closer to the surface of the shoe, and usually this is great if you're doing afros or other kinds of curly hair. So I think this is really good to utilize where you can. So maybe set this to 80 or so. We can set the variation to 50. And then, so tighten we could keep at 100, but maybe we want to go back to curl, and maybe we want to set the curl to 150, and that'll bring it back out a little bit. And then finally we can go back to clump and frizz and play with these. So to start, it was at 10%, and you can see that does a ton right away, which it's a little bit too much. We don't want these to be such large chunks and not so intense. So I might set the radius. We can set this pretty low. I might even do 1 centimeter. And let's try increasing the amount. Okay, maybe this variation we only want to 1, because again, we want to be creating those kind of purled up sections. So yeah, I'm trying to think here. Might even do 0.05, and or even 0.08. Okay, and then you can also control this limit of how many hairs it includes in clumps. So you could play with that as well. Set it to a lower number, and then you're going to get more clumps. Set this to a higher number, and you're going to have less, but it will take more into account there. So I'm going to try 10 or 20 and see how I feel about that. And then frizz. We do want to add some frizz. It's already off, so let's turn that back on. Let's change the variation to 50%, and maybe we want to do 20% for the frizz. And you can even lower this total amount. So I think this is going to be a good start, and we can see what we're working with. So let's hit play on our render view again. So let's zoom out. So this is where we're at with fuzz right now. So I think that's super interesting. We might need some more curls, and we might have too much pieces sticking out. So I think we can change that by going to curl and maybe setting our amount to 98%, but I think that's much better. So again, playing with this will kind of control how many hairs are included in that curling value versus what's sticking out. So just remember to play around with that. Likewise, we could even change the amount of this tighten to 90% or something to get a little bit more variation, but that might be too intense. So also you may notice that, again, the hairs are not quite the same color as the base of our shoe. Let me crop this area a second. So we need to fix that, and we have not added a secondary hair material yet. And if you've seen any of my other videos covering hair, you know that that is a key part of adding some vibrancy to your hairs. So we're going to do that now. We're going to create a principled hair material, which is from Redshift, and we're going to drag that onto our hair object. And when we click on our hair material, we need to drag our albedo all the way up so it uses the color from the first hair. And right away, that will change the color, which is exactly what we need. So right now it matches it much, much better. Perfect. We could also up the roughness, a little bit more vibrant. So that's pretty fun. Okay, and then what we could do is we could also add some variation to our hairs. So we could add some stray hairs Let's try to create a similar purple color. Maybe we want this to be a little bit lighter than before, and we can choose how many stray hairs we have throughout our hair material. So stray hair fraction, if it's at 0, you'll have no stray hairs. If it's at 1, the whole thing will change to that color. So it just lightens all the hairs. So let's set this maybe to like 0.2, so you can see we've got some variation, which is nice. And then finally, the only other thing that I'm really noticing here is that you can still see through to the slipper. So I think we don't have enough hairs. So we can just go to our hair section. Let's also change the viewport mode to guidelines, but we can go to hairs and we can go to cloning, and let's set the root and tip value to about 0.1. And then let's increase our clones maybe by 2. Yeah, so as you can see, we've got much thicker hair. You honestly can't even see the logo, which brings me to something else that we need to do, which is remove some polygons from the slipper selection so it does not add hair over the tag. So I'm going to pause our IPR for now. We know we have our hair to a spot that we like, so let's save. And let's go into our left slipper, and we're going to go to our shoe selection. I'm going to select that. I'm going to close our Redshift render view for now. Let's make sure we're in face selection. And I'm going to do a couple things here so that we can remove our tag kind of from that area where it's growing hair. So I'm actually going to go into the knife tool or the line cut, and I'm going to make a selection around our tag. So something like that. So it's almost like a slight shell around the tag there. And then I'm going to go into the tag and the logo, and I'm going to hide those. Handy little feature there. And we are going to start deselecting those. So we deselected that area where the tag would be. And we're just going to update our shoe selection. We're going to go into the left hair object that we created, and let's just go back to the guides, and we'll go to the editing section, and we're going to hit regrow and reroute. And that should change things up so that there is no hair growing in that particular area. So that's exactly what we want. It also made it a little bit more randomized, which is great. So I'm happy with that. Let's take a look again at what the hairs are looking like. Beautiful. Okay, so we got our tag poking through there, which is great, but I think I'm realizing our hairs might be a little bit too long because this is sticking quite far out. So we could change that with the tighten modifier again. We could also change the length of our hair a little bit. So let's try 1.2 for the hair length. Okay, so I think that's good as far as length goes, but yeah, as you can see, I think we're needing some more hairs across the shoe. Maybe we want to set this to 1.5. I'm actually going to set our hair back to the hairlines in the viewport because I want to be able to see these, and I think it's a little bit difficult just waiting for the render view. Okay, I might change, let's see, I think this means the hair tips are not being curled at all, and I do want them to be a little bit more curled. So I might set that, maybe add some more variation to the curls. Let's see, clumping we could also probably take up a bit. Maybe we want to set that to 2. Maybe I want to set the clumping to 25. Okay, so something like that, maybe 0.1 even for the tip. Cool, so let's take a look at what that looks like now. Okay, let's change our clumping value back up. Okay, so I think that is pretty nice. Maybe let me just change even the area so I can see where we're looking with the tag. Okay, so I think those are actually kind of nice. Then maybe this is where we want to just finally play with some of the extra stray hairs. I might actually make this more of a red tone. Before I preview that, I think we can just add this to our other shoe as well. So now let's bring in a Redshift camera, and let's set that to around 120 for the focal length. And I'm going to zoom out here a little bit and just maybe go here, and I'm going to change my output format to 2000 by 2200 and the resolution to 300. I'm also going to go into Redshift Advanced, set my threshold to 0.1 just for the sake of the tutorial. Set this to length 6 for the filter size, enable denoising, and I'll do the new one, the OIDN. And I'll go to System, set the bucket size to 256, and set the used UP memory to 60 or 70, and then we should be good. So let's reframe our camera here, pull in an area light, and this will be used to create like an edge light around the fuzz. And now let's turn off the render region and we'll hit play. That's kind of how you recreate some Bombas slippers, guys. I really hope you enjoyed. You guys know I love a fuzzy texture, so this is super fun. And I think these would be great for like close-up detail shots. Yeah, this is kind of how you do this particular shot and style. And hopefully you guys can now go out and create your own Bombas slippers of your dreams. I hope you enjoyed. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. See ya.